going. And auto transcription is enabled. And I think with that, we've got everything going. Folks who are joining us, the chat and some other functions are currently off, as we do when we start out the meeting. And we will open that up as we move forward. And oops, that's the end, not the beginning. All right, so welcome everyone to our April virtual membership meeting of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition. My name is Michael Taylor Judd, and I'm currently the chair of our organization. And we're glad that you could join us tonight. I know we actually have at least one person who's outside walking around, so they're enjoying the weather and our meeting. But thank you to those of you who decided to sit inside rather than enjoy a little bit of the evening. Hopefully we've got a great agenda that you'll be interested in tonight. We'll do a quick welcome and introductions. I'm not sure if we've got minutes yet to approve, but that's always on the agenda, so I left it there. We will have a brief conversation with some of our usual friends from Seattle Department of Transportation, just to get a quick update about how concrete pours went and the latest West Seattle Bridge repair updates. And then we will introduce you to some new SDOT friends who will be joining us to talk about the draft freight lane policy plan, and just tell you a little bit more about what the Seattle Freight Advisory Board is and how they involve community in the work that SDOT does. And we will pop up those URLs later if you're looking for more information. At that point, we will transition to talk a little bit about some of the comments that the West Seattle Transportation Coalition is making on the West Seattle Ballard Link Extension Draft Environmental Impact Statement. We will talk about the fact that it's board elections time coming up in May and June. And so we'll briefly talk about that, who on the board is up for re-election and what positions are open, and how you can make nominations or nominate yourself if you're interested in running. And then we will wrap up a little bit with old business. We'll do a little bit of a debrief on how our DEIS 101 facilitated workshop went in April. So hopefully if you were one of the folks who was able to join or who's watched it up on our YouTube channel, hopefully you learned a little bit and it helped you shape some of your comments. And we aim to be wrapped up by 8:30. If you've not joined us before, the purpose of the West Seattle Transportation Coalition is to be a peninsula-wide organization working to address transportation and commuting challenges for the nearly 100,000 people living and working here on the West Seattle Peninsula. We do this by securing the support of residents, engaging elected officials at all levels. Look out for next month in May, where we're looking to be joined by Mayor Bruce Harrell, as well as possibly a couple of city council members, but stay tuned for that. We also partner with government agencies, with our guests tonight from SDOT, and we engage with businesses, community organizations, neighborhood groups, and individuals in order to help educate them or collect their feedback, like we did back in April with our workshop. Our goals are affordable and equitable transportation options, particularly in historically underserved neighborhoods, a transportation network that moves people and goods in an environmentally sustainable manner, and investments in transportation infrastructure that match Seattle's growth. In particular, our priorities that we're keeping an eye on in 2022 are continuing to work with our friends at the city and the county and Metro to restore capacity in the West Seattle Bridge Transportation Corridor, advocating for funding maximum mobility while the High Bridge is continuing to be closed, supporting Sound Transit 3's planning, education, and outreach, and monitoring the SR 160 Fauntleroy Ferry Terminal Trestle and Span Replacement Project. With that, usually we pause here, but I think everybody knows how to Zoom and chat and things right now. So I'm going to move us along to the introduction portion. If you've not joined us before, we don't ask everybody to pile in and announce who they are. We will direct you to the chat, which I will enable here, where we encourage you to drop your name, any pronouns or access needs if you're comfortable sharing with us, maybe what neighborhood you live or work in. And then this month's question, now that we're beginning to anticipate the West Seattle Bridge is going to finally reopen sometime this summer, how do you want to celebrate? There's folks planning. In fact, I think I saw someone from the Junction Association slipping in to be a guest tonight, and so I think they're part of making plans for how we'll celebrate when it opens. So drop some answers over there. What is it that you want to do? Do you want to bike across? Do you want to walk across? Do you want to stand at the top with your children and spin around as if you were what was it, Mary Tyler Moore in Times Square? Like whatever it is that you're thinking and wanting to do, we want to hear that. And then if you didn't receive an email reminding you about tonight's meeting, send a private chat message. You can switch who it goes to in the chat to John Wright, who's one of our board members, and he'll make sure to get you on our email list. And with that, I believe Kate said we don't have meeting minutes, correct?
I sent out January and February.
Oh, okay. Apparently I missed them. Did the rest of the board see those?
Do we have a quorum?
I think we have a quorum.
Okay.
We'll leave it to the next meeting.
And I should just jump in here. My internet is not as good down in here in Olympia as usual. So if I start stuttering or freezing, maybe tag somebody else to moderate questions if we're doing that.
Sounds good. I'll toss to Deb to be moderator tonight. How does that sound? All right, I got a thumbs up there. So again, I'll remind folks, if you're looking to see what's been going on with our previous meetings or some of the guests we've had, since the pandemic started, we've been recording and tossing up to YouTube, so you can look for us there. This is what the banner looks like, as well as if you're on our Facebook page, we've live streamed most of them, and so you can go there and look through the library there as well. I will move along here then to Heather, because we promised her she could update and then skedaddle and get out to enjoy the weather. So welcome again, our longtime friend Heather Marks, who's Director of Downtown Mobility, and Madison Lincolnmeyer, who's a communications lead, who'll be running the slides for her. Take it away, you guys.
Thank you all for having me back, and thanks, Madison, for being here with me. It's nice to see so many friendly faces. Ooh, and I see Whitney Moore. That's excellent. Hey, Whitney. Madison, if you want to bring up the PowerPoint.
I have real quick. It still says disabled for me.
Uh-oh.
Michael, if you can.
I'm always
permissions, and then I'll share my screen quick.
Yep. In here. All right, sorry about that, folks. Technical difficulties.
Sorry.
Oh, I see what happened. There we go. Try it again.
Okay. Okay, it's working. Just give me 1 second.
You'd think I'd have it memorized.
Okay,
do.
Is that working?
Yep.
I love it. Looks beautiful. Okay, so I want to update you this evening about our high bridge repair updates, low bridge projects and performance, and a little bit about where we are with Reconnect West Seattle. So, no, that was perfect, Madison. So just want to let you know that core drilling is complete. That is an activity where we have to drill some holes on the inside of the box girders so that we can string the post-tensioning tendons through from end to end. We have received not just our first, but our second structural concrete for post-tensioning those anchor block elements. and we're continuing to prepare for post-tensioning. We expect to get our third of 6 structural concrete pours tomorrow. Something I want to note that maybe is only clear on the inside is we call our concrete vendors and ask for a date, for a delivery date, and sometimes they say no. So we don't know when that last concrete pour is going to be. We know when we would like it to be, but we don't know when it's going to be. So that's something that we don't control, and it's painful every day. We are continuing to work on epoxy crack injections and carbon fiber wrap on particularly the west side of the bridge. Our expansion joint replacement is underway and will continue till we are done. We're working very closely with Kramer North America, who is our contractor, to make sure that they have all the everything behind them that we can offer to help them help the concrete vendors prioritize our project. Something that we recently had brought to our attention, we have a nesting pair of peregrine falcons. They're just above the Pier 15. We've worked very quickly with Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife to get a falcon management plan together. Our permitting team is really excellent, and they turned it from a falcon crisis into a falcon plan an approved falcon plan in less than a week, which is pretty impressive. Next slide, please, Madison. This hopefully by now is a familiar graphic. The orange shows you the parts that are under construction, so exterior carbon fiber wrap, as well as the concrete pours for the post-tensioning work. We have finished core drilling for post-tensioning, and we have completed the center span interior carbon fiber wrap and epoxy injections. We're waiting for that last concrete. Next slide, please. Oh, my Lord. Seriously, Michael, half of what I've done the past 2 years, I never would have expected to do. So here are the key elements in the rehabilitation schedule, and these are the pieces of information that are going to help us know when the new opening date is. So the key inputs into the schedule are concrete availability and completing those structural pours. The other project risks are supply chain. This is something that we haven't experienced too much of, but we have learned not to say never. Worker shortages is a big deal, particularly when it comes to Burlington Northern Santa Fe. They have to provide flaggers when we do work over the rails. And so they are having some shortages. And so getting those folks assigned has been a challenge. It's sort of moved up the list in terms of things that we're concerned about. COVID continues to present a problem. Obviously, if somebody has a close contact or a positive test, there's still quarantining that needs to happen. So that can slow us down. The weather is becoming less of a concern as we move out of winter. Falcons, awesome. And also unforeseen issues in construction. We know a lot about this bridge, but I'm sure that there are still ways that it can surprise us. So about a month before we reopen to traffic, sooner if I can, I'll share the reopening date. As soon as construction is complete, we will test the bridge for strength and resiliency, and that test is expected to last 2 weeks. So between tools down and when the bridge is open, it's going to be 2 weeks, and that's been consistent this whole time. Some of the opening tasks include pouring concrete to fill the access openings created for the repairs. Do you remember that picture that had the tube going from the concrete mixer truck down into we have to fill those We have to complete the expansion joints. Somebody has stolen all the copper wire that illuminates the bridge, that powers the lights that illuminate the bridge. We have to replace that. We're working closely with City Light on that. We have to replace the overhead signs on the bridge and replace about 60 concrete panels east of 35th Avenue Southwest and seal those joints. We have to replace the center barrier, install some concrete overlay on the Fauntleroy Expressway, and reopen all entrances and exits to the High Bridge. All right. When we had to close the bridge on that fateful day, March 23rd, 2020, we had to do a whole bunch of things to close the bridge and make the traffic system around the bridge work as well as it can. So we have to decommission some of those as soon as we are ready to open the bridge. We have to restripe. We have to remove the bus only lanes that direct buses over the low bridge. We have to remove the low bridge restrictions as well as the detour signage. We have to do some retiming of signals, for example, around Fire Station 36. And of course, adjust signal timing throughout the West Seattle Peninsula and the Duwamish Valley along the detour routes. So that's the work that once we're done with the construction, there's still a lot of work to do. Next slide, please. We have pulled almost all the workers off the low bridge and put them on the high bridge because we need to make up time. We are constructing work platforms for that low bridge. We had thought originally that we would raise those platforms into place in May. We have rearranged that to be June. Preparations are underway for the lift cylinder replacement on either of those pillars that turn the leaves to open the bridge. We're also working on a new controls and communication system. Those communication lines used to hang from the high bridge, but when we had that initial scare, we decided it was probably a pretty good idea to bury them under the waterway rather than leave them attached to the high bridge. Once we get those work platforms in, we will be able to start our exterior carbon fiber wrapping and epoxy injections, as well as the interior carbon fiber and epoxy. Next slide, please. So we are working on a bunch of 2022 Reconnect West Seattle projects. 2 of them are done. The rest of them are in construction with the exception of 14th Avenue Safety Project. That's at 14th and Dallas. That one's going to take us a little bit longer than the bridge opening. So that will continue throughout 2022 and possibly into 2023. We also are going to try to do some paving on the detour routes once the bridge is open so that we can bring those up to what passes for good. Next slide, please. We are still waiting for lots of concrete for some of those Reconnect West Seattle projects, and still planning to do a lot of that upcoming traffic mitigation. And we still have some home zone construction projects that are going to continue after the high bridge opens in both Georgetown and Highland Park. Next slide, please. Oh, hey, QR code, that's fresh. You can sign up for weekly email updates on the bridge repair and other Seattle Department of Transportation work in West Seattle. You can go to this QR. Hopefully everyone has already signed up for these updates because they're really good and they come out every Friday, and you will be the very most informed person in your neighborhood. Also, if you go, you can find a recent video of me explaining epoxy and carbon fiber. I think it's pretty funny. Next slide, please. I think that's it. If we have questions, I'm happy to answer whatever you got.
So I'm playing Kate tonight. This is Deb, and I will do the moderation. I don't see any questions on chat, but Jeremy's got his hand up. So take it away, Jeremy.
So Heather, as part of opening the ramps back to the bridge, is that when the approach from Admiral up to the bridge is going to get weeded and presumably concrete patched and all that? Is that part of that line item?
Mhm.
Okay, just,
Or you can just drive over the weeds, Jeremy. They'll go. I'm
I
just
mean,
kidding.
that's
Yeah.
probably true. I just, I don't walk it, so I don't know how much they've damaged the road, but really it's once grass is poking through, it seems like the road might be suspect. So
Yeah,
Well,
we will take care of that.
It's the
Mhm.
green factor. Is it the bridge ramp?
we're greening the bridge. There
Yeah.
we go.
Okay. I don't know.
Hey,
Other,
That was
Deb,
funny.
I've got a question. So concrete's the critical path item. So after
Yep.
the last concrete pour, roughly how many weeks are we going to be? So if it's, are we looking at 20 days, 30 days after the last concrete pour before the bridge has a chance to open up?
Oh, it's going to be far beyond that. We need it. The concrete.
I know it
needs
needs to cure.
The 28 day. The concrete needs 28 days to cure.
Okay.
So, and then there's work that has to be done after that.
Right. The tightening of the steel and that.
Yeah, it's that super plasticizing, self-consolidating concrete. It's really thin, and it goes in really slow, so it doesn't form any air pockets because we can't use. This literally is a technical term. We can't use the vibrators, Mark, to purge all the air bubbles.
I understand that. I'm just asking, so 28 days for the concrete to cure. And then after it cures, they got to tighten up all the steel and all the reinforcing. So how many, roughly 28 days for the curing? How many more days for the rest of the work?
Mark, I really encourage you. Everyone wants an answer, and I totally get it. Do you know who wants an answer more than me? No one. I assure you. We really have to let the contractor do their work here. And so as soon as we get that last pour, we will have not an estimate, we'll have a date. We'll have a date for you. So just hang tight with me. We're going to get there. And as soon as we have an opening date, we will not just an opening date, we'll let you know when we have a done with construction, start the testing date. And then we'll also have an opening date. I know it's really hard to be patient.
great. Other questions? Heather, you didn't mention about the nesting falcons, their due date, or which I thought was significant.
Yeah, I misspoke. So it turns out they fledge in June. They'll hatch sometime in May. But we are the falcon management plan that we have worked out with DFW allows us to continue our work. We just can't do it continuously. So the work continues. It's just a little slower than
it's
we
been
thought.
the best. I've told as many people as I can about the falcons, and they are up. Whitney wants to know, have we named the falcons? Which I know, I'm sure SDOT has all kinds of names for them, but probably can't say them.
Well, SDOT doesn't have names for them, but I suspect that the contractors do.
That's true.
But let's not speculate about that. Whitney, if you wanted to have a fun contest, that would be really great. We would love that.
That's a wonderful thing to focus on for folks. Any other questions? Michael's got a suggestion there for Whitney. Anyone else? Hands up. I'm not seeing anything. No one here, no questions. Heather gets to get out of here then. And you're not going to stay and listen to your colleagues on freight?
No. I know
Sorry.
that's okay. I know what Chris is going to say. Chris is an excellent traffic engineer and an excellent person to have in charge of freight at SDOT. And we're thrilled that he's here to talk to you all. Please do be kind to him. He has very difficult stakeholders. All right, friends. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. I will see you again, I'm sure.
Thanks so much, Heather. Thanks,
Heather.
Madison.
All right. And as always, if you want to learn more, seattle.gov/transportation/West Seattle Bridge. As I like to do commercials, those of you who've been with us, this month I decided to highlight a recent blog post up on the SDOT blog. Levy dollars at work. SDOT is excited that they've completed all of their share of the construction on Delridge Way Southwest, which a lot of us were keeping an eye on for really years at this point. Few bullet points. SDOT started construction on Delridge Way Southwest back in 2020. This project was made possible by investments in the Levy to Move Seattle, as well as a Washington State Regional Mobility Grant and a partnership with King County Metro. As you travel along Delridge Way Southwest, if you haven't already, you will see new bus lanes to support the future Metro Rapid Ride H line between South Lake Union and Burien, freshly paved streets, medians with landscaping, a new bike lane, safer crosswalks to get to transit and local businesses, public art, and other new features. This spring and summer, they're promising to finish planting trees and shrubs and build even more accessible curb ramps. And then they will be continuing their work with Metro to prepare for Rapid Ride H-Line bus service, which is now scheduled to begin in March of 2023. And helping offer support to them for construction that's happening south of Seattle city limits in White Center and Burien. And as someone who was around when we first started talking about landscaped street medians and making Delridge look like a boulevard, I could not be more excited every time I drove by and see trees in the middle of our roadway, making us look like we're actually a part of the city and not some little under-resourced area. So we are, some of us at least, are very excited down in the neighborhood. Moving along on our agenda, as I said at the top, we have some new guests, new friends to make from SDOT who are joining us tonight. Chris Eves, who's a senior civil engineer, specifically around transportation operations with freight. And I hope I say your last name right, Radcliffe Dakane, principal transportation planner at SDOT. They're going to talk to us a little bit about the draft freight lane policy plan that's being proposed. And then I think Radcliffe's going to share a little bit with us about the Seattle Freight Advisory Board, which is an opportunity that SDOT hears community feedback from stakeholders around some of the freight things so that folks understand SDOT doesn't just come up with all of this stuff on their own, but they do have lots of people that they go to for advice around freight, just like they come to groups like us for comments and feedback on buses or other things going on. So take it away. I believe Radcliffe, you're showing slides. So
yes,
take it away when you got a second.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I'm glad to be here. Let me find my presentation there. All right. Can everyone see the slide? Excellent. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Deb, for inviting us and making this happen. Chris Eves and I are working on this draft freight lane policy for our department. And I'll give you just an overview of what we're doing with this and the thinking around it, just the background, and then would like to maybe, if you have initial thoughts on it, and then an overview of next steps. So we've got a fair number of folks who are working on this across the department, including the city engineer, staff from policy and planning, traffic operations, where Chris is at, staff from transit mobility, and some folks in our urban design group. So it's not just Chris and me, it's a coordinated effort across SDOT. And why are we even thinking about freight lanes, freight only lanes, freight and bus lanes? Initially, when we started this, it was only about freight only lanes and looking at freight bottlenecks. and seeing that they were becoming more of a normal experience in different parts of town, especially where large freight trucks are accessing industrial land uses. So we've got some language in the freight lane master plan that says go forth and explore the opportunities to do freight only lanes and to do freight and bus lanes, and then see where we can integrate and find that balance with freight improvements and with other modes. So in trying to do any of this work, it's all about ensuring safety for all modes, not just focusing on one mode at a time. Key goals in the Freight Master Plan, very similar to all of the other goals that we've are undergirding SDOT's work around equity, safety, economy, mobility, sustainability, and environment. So again, trying to be as cohesive and thoughtful across the board. And as I mentioned earlier around building on the Freight Master Plan, these are just some of the strategies and actions, and highlighted here are the language around looking at shared opportunities for shared transit and freight only lanes, and seeing if we can test out the use of truck only lanes. And then also we've got our master modal plans around transit, around bicycling and pedestrian master plan, looking to integrate with freight in certain ways. And then the modal integration policy framework from last year essentially was a white paper saying, we need to look at opportunities and benefits of an integrated approach to planning instead of separate modal plans. So this is where we looked at opportunities to think about freight improvements within the manufacturing and industrial centers, but making sure that we're doing this and thinking as well about safety of people who are walking, people who are riding bikes, people taking transit, and people also who are driving. So we've come up with this draft freight lane policy, very broad, admittedly. I'll just read it out here. Dedicated freight only lanes and transit lanes that allow freight will be considered in locations where they can improve freight mobility and avoid negative impacts to other transportation users. So other people who are, again, walking, riding their bikes, or taking transit, where there is sort of this interface with freight, we got to make sure that those situations are safe. So how do we even begin to think about the tactics that would enable or carry out this freight lane policy? Key here is we're going to test these as pilots, especially for the freight and bus and freight only lane ideas. From the transit perspective, we're going to look at places where the buses per hour don't exceed 20 buses per hour during peak periods. And so this opens up where we would look at our opportunities to do freight and bus. And and we'd also do testing to make sure that transit reliability and rider experience isn't negatively impacted. And then prioritizing freight only lanes and possibly the freight and bus in the manufacturing and industrial centers and along major truck streets. And then making sure that we've done enough modeling or compatibility analysis to make sure that freight and buses are working together where we propose a freight and bus lane. And for freight only lanes, we're going to be considering primarily these locations where they're beginning to access commercial industrial experiences, activities that are having frequent bottlenecks. And for right now, the focus is on larger sized vehicles. So typically your freight trailer trucks, class 7 and higher, so over 26,000 pounds. Am I moving this forward? Okay. And then how might we think about operationalizing this? So I'll use a couple maps to help think through this. For freight only lanes, we would only locate them in manufacturing and industrial centers. So in the north part of the city would be Ballard Inner Bay, And then in the southern part of the city would be the Duwamish Valley, SODO. And then when we would look at freight and bus, we want to think about systematically that where buses are 20 buses per hour relative to the freight network. So just a couple slides here. Looking at the freight network, this is in purple. And then looking at AM peak of where buses are 20 or more buses per hour. And then during the midday, you see that it's primarily 3rd Avenue in downtown Jackson and a few spots up by the university. And then the PM peak pretty much mimics the AM peak. So when we're looking at the rest of the light purple there, opportunities for coordination with our program developers on bus only lanes and seeing perhaps there might be opportunities timing wise, say 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. to use some of the available capacity to share, have a shared lane with freight and bus. So right now, some potential candidates we're thinking about from a freight and bus lane perspective, mostly in the north part of the city. We've got Westlake, Aurora Avenue, and then 15th and Elliott. For freight only lanes, we're looking in SODO. We've got East Marginal, we've got a segment of Spokane. We've adjusted this to reflect that it would not include the lower bridge. And then also thinking the opportunities on West Marginal. And again, this is just conceptual for discussion purposes only. We haven't really even begun to look at the details of how this could possibly work. Before we would do that, we would certainly do more engagement with the community, do more research on the feasibility of these, but we're just shopping these ideas around internally to see if we might be able to deliver an opportunity. Still TBD, we thought we might do something this year. That particular opportunity seems to be adjusting. So we're continuing to get feedback from various internal partners, advisory boards, like the Seattle Freight Advisory Board, and then continue stakeholder engagement like this to get your feedback. We need to do a SEPA review, and then eventually get to a pilot project, which is still TBD. And that's it for my presentation. We can jump into Q&A, or if maybe Chris, if you want to say a few words too regarding SFAB and how it relates to this work and SFAB in general.
Sure. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a moment and highlight a couple of items that were touched on. There's a reason we wanted to go over 26,000 pounds of registered carrying capacity, because once you have a tractor or a truck and trailer that is registered for that weight, you need a commercial driver's license. So we're looking to have professional drivers be people who are in, at the very least, the pilot. It also, thanks to a lot of work that we've done with the University of Washington and their urban freight lab, they helped us identify not just by time of day right down to the hour, but the type of vehicle that we're seeing in downtown in the Ballard area. And they have other data that we're processing now to begin to give us an idea of what more of our major truck streets are carrying. And part of why that helps us is because, and another point that Radcliffe touched on, the timing can be really important. Morning peak and afternoon peak, we all pretty much know them, but there's a truck peak or period of time from 9 to 1. So it makes us think that if we're looking at a shared lane, we'd want to make sure that it is when the trucks have the most value and there's potentially the least impact on any type of transit movement. I'm going to be a little bit selfish at this point in time and say that since I work with the freight program, any type of project like this, we really want it to be successful and wouldn't want to just put this on in any location. I've said it before, and again, rightfully is probably getting bored with it. We don't want to paint a broad paintbrush on this. We want to use this as a tool where we have issues or congestion that we need to find our best use of our roadway. So the goal here is to have an opportunity where we think we could, as well as understand what happens and is important to groups like yours, and to understand at the very technical, down on the ground level with the truck drivers, what type of benefits they could see for this. So the goal here is to take advantage of opportunities when we can and make sure that we understand what we're getting into the best way we're able, which is why we're also starting with pilot projects. So that's kind of my compression and spiel on this. And certainly, Radcliffe and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. This is Deb again, and we did have a question in chat from Michael and other folks. I'm looking for your hand to be raised or you waving at me, and we'll come back to Jeremy then after Michael. You want to cover your question, Michael?
Sure, although I think maybe you sort of captured it in the maps there, Radcliffe. It looks like you're looking at Westlake as possible shared freight and bus lanes kind of through the area that I was talking about. So I'll just quickly mention to Chris, I think, you know, what we hear as concerns repeatedly over here, you know, once the bridge reopens, the majority of traffic is up above on the high bridge, thankfully. So our big concerns that we tend to hear is really the interactions between freight and bicycles, which in the corridor between the peninsula here and downtown, that's where sort of both of those modes have to go and share space, and that's just really not a great safe interaction. And unfortunately, we've seen a number of not just injuries but really deaths over the last few years. And so anything we can do to look at how we keep those two modes separated from each other is really a win-win, I think, for everybody. And I'm excited to see the possibility of testing, because it seems like every time we want SDOT to test out an idea, SDOT's never open to testing. So whatever you figure, whatever you guys' secret is to get a test project out of SDOT for this, we are very excited for you.
We know where the skeletons are. No.
Thank you, Michael.
So actually, Michael, I'd love to kind of respond to that. One of the longstanding goals for the Freight Advisory Board, which we can talk about in a bit, is a separation of modes, especially on the high truck volume roads. East Marginal Way is a really good example where it's being reconstructed. It's going to have a distinct and separate bike facility parallel on East Marginal Way. There are a number of upcoming construction impacts and work that's going to need to be done. But you are speaking my language in that the last thing we want to do is further concern our various modes and our vulnerable users. And I'm kind of going to roll into Kate. I know, Jeremy, you're
go for it. Yeah.
Yes, freight and bus lanes, we still need to understand how we operate for bikes. Parallel routes is a really good concept. Westlake, which we had considered maybe being part of a pilot project, which we're still trying to figure out, has a parallel facility. And so you again are hitting on some of the things that we're trying to take into consideration as we look at this. Again, we're not trying to do something because it might be cool. We're trying to do this because it provides us a better overall function. So both of you, yes, and you're hitting on various tones that we've wanted to make sure we were including.
Chris, I want to jump in real quick, and I'm sorry, Jeremy, because I know your hand's up and I will get you, but you mentioned East Marginal and the freight lanes and sharing with bikes. What we have been concerned, many folks have been concerned about and have many opinions about, is West Marginal, where the Reconnect West Seattle project is proposing some new bike lanes to kind of complete a trail. Has your group been involved in some of that on West Marginal, or are you only looking at East Marginal right now?
I've mostly been looking at East Marginal. I do know that we have work going on with West Marginal, and I've had some exposure to that, making sure that what we have, for example, are good turning radii for the large vehicles in and out of their drives. And all of the people who are working on it are trying to ensure that we have proper sight distance, proper lane widths. If you have a lane that's too tight for a truck, it's, you know, the outcome is never really great. The mirrors stick out further by another foot than the actual vehicle. So we want 11-foot lanes for them minimum. And so as we look at a design on West Marginal Way, we want to incorporate those needs as well as the bike path needs.
Okay. So Kate, did you have anything that you wanted to add to with West Marginal, since I'm just kind of jumping in here?
I think between you and Michael, you've actually covered my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Jeremy, and then we'll come back to Michael's other question. There you
go. Would I be correct in assuming that these lanes for freight would not be a privilege, but and in fact an enforcement? So any through traffic would have to be in these lanes, leaving the lanes for other vehicles, aside from when they're when they need to turn for their route and getting into the road, et cetera. But basically, so if Harbor Island starts backing up, that it's all the trucks are stuck in one lane and all the cars get to be moving in another. Is that the idea, or no?
Both yes and no. Okay. How's that for an answer?
That's a government answer.
Yes, I got it. Good, my work is done. No, these are not designed to be queuing lanes. They're about getting vehicles moving. So any type of evaluation we have would be more about movement rather than storage, whether it be short term or longer. As we look at this, we're not considering an enforced, this is the only place a truck can go style of lane. And part of that reason, again, is movement, so that when we get down to it, some of the locations we have may not fit our ultimate goal, which is, again, getting goods and services as well as people to their final destination. Part of what I think, and again, this is my personal thought, is that we would not be able to do a freight only lane without a parallel general purpose vehicle lane, so that there is always an option available. That makes me think more that the at grade Spokane Street might be a place when you have multiple lanes to get to I-5, a regional connector. Again, trying to move things rather than store things.
Okay, great. Jeremy, thank you for your question. Michael has written another question, giving consideration to leading pedestrian interval LPI signal timing, which traditionally gives pedestrians the opportunity to enter crosswalks at an intersection 3 to 7 seconds before vehicles are given a green indication in areas that might not have high pedestrian volumes, but have high bicycle volumes.
So you are talking about signal engineering, which is not my forte. That group literally sits halfway around the floor to me. I believe that we're trying to add LPI in as many places as it will benefit. It seems like this in a high volume or high bike volume corridor has a potential opportunity and benefit, but we're really speaking outside of my wheelhouse. So I'd rather be more conservative and say maybe.
That's all right. I typed it over there in the chat because it's kind of for folks who don't deal with that. It sounds really complicated and wieldy. But yeah, I mean, I know it's something that's increasingly popular across North America, in typically downtown areas and high pedestrian areas. But it might be really helpful in some of these interactions where we have bikes crossing paths with trucks and really giving the bicyclists an opportunity to get out in front of the trucks before they start turning.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and I'll do a real quick response, Kate. You can act as a pedestrian as the pedestrian signal moves, so you would be able to use the crosswalk when you have that LPI, leading pedestrian interval.
Cool. That's great. That's it for the questions on this topic. You're going to talk about the Freight Advisory Board now?
Yes, and
Awesome.
I've eaten quite a bit of time, and Radcliffe, I apologize for just beginning to run at the, okay, thanks. So the Freight Advisory Board, it's exactly what it sounds like. We have a volunteer board who is engaged in goods movement, and we include port and rail, marine, food, especially restaurant. There's a long story, but it's a good story we can try later. We've included also, as one of our members in the past, a bus driver, and we have truck drivers also, to get an idea of where our parallel opportunities exist. So as many of the advisory boards, these people bring their expertise and their thoughts to us and allow us to put things in front of them and say, what do you think? A lot of our work revolves around looking at designs and understanding why, while something looks really good, it might not be the best for us. That involves turning radii at intersections and a lot more boring things, for lack of a better way of saying it. But it helps us as we try and make sure that our very large vehicles can interact with all our other modes, including the vulnerable users. Something that was mentioned a little bit earlier was, well, I think it was mentioned, I can't quite recall with who. The work we do deals with supply chain on all levels, and it isn't just the big giant belchy smoky trucks. It's how you get your parcel deliveries. UPS has been a member of our board previously. I hope they will be again. It moves to how we get goods into our downtown core. And we begin to try and ask questions of how much time is necessary at the curb. We've also had a really great relationship with the University of Washington's Urban Freight Lab. They've helped us establish a lot of baseline information and help us understand how we can be even more efficient, especially downtown, but also how we as a population are changing from going to the store per se to receiving goods at our home from all these other types of deliveries. Quick note, before the pandemic began, the concept of online grocery ordering was expected to reach, I think, 5% acceptance in a 20-year period. The pandemic moved that to a 1-year period. So changes have been happening, and they've been happening rather quickly. Amazon driver, yes, we've actually, we keep enticing Amazon to come play with us. And let's see, yes, Deb, there is, and if I can, I might overtax your, there it goes. I'm dumping in a pretty large set of text to the, oh yeah, that's just huge. And I think I lost the link. Okay, I'll put a link in as to where you can apply to any of the boards. for that. So truly, it's one of the volunteer boards, just like the PED and transit and bicycle boards. We just focus on large vehicles and their specific needs and what happens in the background that many people don't see, aside from the big giant truck that once a year turns over on I-5 and everybody goes, oh, good grief. So I recognize that we're tight on our time at this point. So if anyone has questions, I'd love to hear what you have.
Muted. Chris, you're going to go ahead and then add that link. That's great. I had noted that there were freight advisory board openings, and I'd actually encouraged someone who was always commenting on the West Seattle Bridge component, the broken West Seattle Bridge component, to look into being on the freight advisory board. We'll see if that happens. But that's great to, well, it's not great to know that there are a number of openings, but it's good opportunities to be on these boards. And so I encourage everybody who's out there to look into seeing what's your whistle as far as being on a SDOT board. Any questions that we have? I don't see anything in the chat and I don't see hands up. So I'll take anyone shouting out. No questions.
Yes, I bored him. I will add that the pedestrian advisory board also has a number of openings. So please check on the link. The interaction that we get from our residents is critical for us. And I will say, at least from the freight board, I've learned a great deal that has helped me do the work I do. So thank you all for being the people who are interested.
I had the opportunity to be on Sound Transit board with Walter, and I can't remember his last name, begins with an A, who I learned so much about freight. So it's always good to get to know things that are out of your realm. And
are you sick? Might it be Warren?
Warren, sorry, close enough, close. Warren, last name A.
Akravic.
Yes. Warren is
Warren's been around forever.
He has been, but you know, he's preaching stuff that is incredibly relevant. And this is before the pandemic that he was preaching it. So I know he's talking it even more right now. So any questions out there? Not seeing any. That I'm going to turn it back over to Michael.
Tracy, yes, the deadline was extended. It is open and ongoing.
So for folks who haven't looked, so Chris dropped a bunch of info about various boards into the chat. I've got the SDOT blog post there. And then as you heard, the blog said that deadline was in April, but that's been extended. And folks who are joining us now or later on Facebook, you can find that info and the link in a comment there on the live broadcast.
I just decided I do have a question. Sorry. And this is for Radcliffe and Chris. I just want to ask, and I had reached out to both of you based on a member of the community who saw the draft freight lane policy, the previous drawings of potential areas. And I appreciate your time coming tonight. And I appreciate also seeing that the map has been revised to not to avoid the low bridge, and that truly that's wonderful to see. How many so my question is, how many changes do you see happening to this map before it becomes final? I know it's draft or for discussion only. Do you announce changes when you're modifying it? Do people just kind of have to keep a watch on it? What's your notification on changes, additions, deletions to that draft map?
I'll give it a go here. And you know, for a project like this where it's so conceptual, just getting feedback from you, Deb, from folks who let us know, and with our internal partners working on this, for a time earlier on, we had Aurora Boulevard going all the way to the bridge, and folks told us, no, it can't go down to the bridge. You've got to start it a little bit further up 45th. So we made that adjustment. And as we're having these conversations with internal staff, we're getting ideas that, why don't you think about this or think about that? I think it's a way for us to have the conversation of, this is what we're thinking. And just as Chris was saying, it's not a broad brush approach. Really, these are going to be segments within these potential candidates. So it's going to be much more surgical than it even looks right now.
Okay, Chris?
And I would like to note too, that as with any project, we would not just go off of a map and then the next week say, this is great, let's go. We would have we would have certainly with this type of pilot project, notification information on a location that we were actively considering rather than just concept wise saying these might be valid. So there is no gotcha moment, for lack of a better way of saying it. We would have a discussion and it would be one where we wanted to understand clearly the specifics of a location that we were actively considering rather than just this large area that might be valid.
Will your team be working then with the group who's dealing with the West Marginal Way? I'm assuming that's not part of the test.
No, I don't think it's going to be part of the test. Again,
Okay.
that location manages to conceptually hit what a freight lane location would be, major truck street over legal, a certain amount of volume of vehicles, trucks, and that's why we're looking at it. How we act or enact or move forward is going to take a lot more consideration than, hey, we did a calculation and this seemed like it was fun. We do not want to move that way.
That's much appreciated. I know there'll always be discussion about that, about West Marginal Way, because we love to discuss things. Hey, Tracy, I just want to verify you got your question answered, correct? She's probably writing an article. KJ's hang on, we just did. Hey, there's KJ's iPhone. Welcome. Okay, I've got my question answered. Don't see anyone else. I'm going to assume that Tracy's question got answered. Yes, breaking news also happening, says Tracy. Gee, some big surprise. Right. Back to you, Michael.
Yeah, let's give big thanks to Radcliffe and Chris. We certainly would love to have you back anytime. So, keep us posted on how this is rolling out or if there's anything we can help you with out here in the West Seattle area.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. To keep us moving along here. So we are running pretty close to schedule. We've got a lot of time here, but I'm not actually looking to spend half an hour, unless people have questions, half an hour on various comments that the Transportation Coalition is submitting. You've heard us talk a lot over the last couple months around this, so I was just going to highlight some issues and do Q&A if anyone has that. We'll talk briefly about board elections and debrief, and then if we're good, maybe we'll wrap up ahead of 8:30. So moving on here. So what are some of the folks probably want to know? What are some of the draft EIS comments that the West Seattle Transportation Coalition has been talking about or looking to submit? And so these are got 8 bullet points. So these are sort of the top 8, I think, that either board members have identified or we've heard as we're around talking to other community groups that we represent or that we heard feedback at the workshop we held, etc. And so feel free to ask questions about any of them after I go over. A couple of things have come up as a suggestion. There are things that were taken off of the plate early on and not studied further, but we know a lot more about cost of acquiring land and expenses that have gone up. So a couple of things that have been put forward is bringing back the so-called long tunnel, which is an alignment that would go along Yancey over by Nucor and the health club, and a storage facility that's there, and then go into a longer tunnel over there underneath Avalon and tunnel into the West Seattle Junction, as well as folks talking about, maybe we need to look at the Purple Line again, which was an early alternative that looked at coming further south before crossing the Duwamish and coming actually through a tunnel through Puget Ridge, kind of along the Genesee alignment there, and then coming out and running across Genesee in some fashion, and then going into a tunnel in the Avalon area there up to the junction. Or actually, I think early on there was even a possibility of then going elevated into the junction. Another point that's come up is, something that's been brought up by some of the other transit groups around the city, is, we're looking at some particularly high stations here, Chinatown, and some other portions of the light rail extension are looking at some really deep underground. But here we're looking at some pretty high station heights that could be impediments to transfer time or to accessibility if people have to be navigating multiple escalators or waiting for elevators, taking 5-6 minutes just to go from a bus onto the light rail. Some folks have talked about making sure that going through and looking at the bus route data. We're a little uncertain as to some of the things that are there in the draft DEIS. Although I will, on behalf of our friends at Sound Transit, I will caution that Sound Transit doesn't run the buses. So much like when we go and ask Metro to chat with us, they're only dependent on the data and information that Metro is willing to share with them. But sort of encouraging them to push back, see if Metro's got any contingencies they're looking at. We've talked about highlighting, the carbon footprint calculations that are in there, or maybe not sort of really in there, and taking a bit of a deeper look at, the impacts of both building some pretty major infrastructure and how that impacts carbon emissions, as well as how much may or may not be removed from traffic emissions by building these. A lot of folks are very familiar over here in North Delridge and along the ridge. There's a South Bridge crossing that a lot of folks favor for various reasons, but some people here are really pushing the North Bridge crossing over the Duwamish, which is tagged DUW2 in the DEIS, specifically to avoid literally cutting into and filling in a part of Pigeon Point, as well as there is a great blue heron colony that is there. And so really sort of looking at, there's sort of downsides to any of the alternatives crossing the Duwamish there, and really sort of weighing those carefully. That also may tie back to why some folks are pushing the Purple Line again. There's a question about the Nucor station placement, as some of us refer to it. And again, that's an option that looks at running along that, skirting along Nucor and Yancey as a route alternative, and where the station is currently placed seems a little odd to a lot of folks in the neighborhood who years ago were sort of saying there are some rather large vacant parking lots sitting there right now. Why wouldn't we take advantage of the fact that there's open parking lots to take over rather than taking out large buildings or homes? There's some questions about TOD numbers, transit-oriented development, that seem to really just emphasize gains, but not the loss of hundreds of homes and businesses potentially, depending on what routes are chosen. And finally, there are a number of folks who are still talking about, what's the possibility of, eliminating or at least delaying the Avalon station. In particular, some folks were kind of surprised that, some of the figures and slides that Sound Transit is shared or that are in the DEIS are only quoting ridership numbers of about 1,200 people initially at the station there, which seems rather low. And so if we can save a lot of money and avoid, some engineering headaches by, delaying that station, especially if many of those riders could divert either to Delridge or to the West Seattle Junction station. Those all seem like things that we should at least really weigh and study some of the trade-offs in that, so that the Sound Transit Board can make an informed decision if it gets to that point. So those are some of the key things that we've been talking about or have heard. Does anyone have any questions either about what some of these mean or anything else?
Not seeing any questions in the chat or raised hands or people waving.
All right. Then let's talk about board elections. So I feel like typically we're running about a month late. I think we're on time this year to get back on our old cadence of nominations or elections, but at least nominations in May and elections in June. But if we don't have any other folks interested in putting forward, we may just do elections in May. Our board election slate, a few of our happy shining faces over there. We have 5 positions. All of our even numbered positions are up for re-election this year. And there is an odd numbered position on the board that's vacant, although there's no requirement that we have a full board. So the folks who are up for re-election this year are Victoria Nelson, who is not with us this evening, Deb Barker, myself, Michael Taylor Judd, Catherine Wells, who you've heard before, and Marty Westerman, who's been unusually quiet tonight, Marty.
Victoria didn't want to move
Yes, so folks saying, why is Victoria going to strike through her there? So Victoria has informed us, she hasn't run away. She's going to be continue to be involved. She's just, I believe, out with a visiting friend or family member tonight. But Victoria has let us know that she's going to be stepping back from being on the board and just go to being, an active participant and member. So position 2 will be wide open and vacant. I'm also going to announce tonight that I will not be standing, I will not be continuing on as chair of the coalition, although I'm not disappearing immediately. I'll be around to help shepherd some new person into leadership here. And going along with that, since we have an open odd numbered position, rather than standing for another 2-year term, I'm going to stand for position 7 and stick around for, for 6 months to a year, help shepherd some new leadership in, and then I will be stepping away from the board as well. And then I will let Deb, Catherine, or Martin offer if they'd like to declare now that they are running for re-election.
Well, this is Deb, and I declare that I am running for election for position number 4. Ooh. That's weird. Okay.
And
thanks.
I'll stay on in position 8 if you will have me.
I'm going to also start my hiatus period. So I'll be sticking with the board until replacement for vice chair is found. And so I'll stay on for another 6 months or 3 months, depending on how quickly that transpires.
All right, so we got some big changes coming along here. So if you're one of the what did I see here? If you're one of the few people snuck away, but I see we've got about 11 people hanging on. A bunch of us must be bored, but I see a few of you out there who maybe if you've been thinking about getting more involved, or you've got some ideas for how this organization can take next steps forward. Now's your opportunity to think about that. You can learn more about, and if you're wondering, hey, I want to know more about these folks before I actually vote for them next month, you can learn more about us in our bios there on our West Seattle Transportation Coalition website. I think there's only a few folks, but I should at least offer, is there anybody who wants to ask questions about being on the board or wants to declare that they're interested in running for a board position?
And I'm not seeing anybody's hand raised right now.
And folks can always reach out to us at info at westseattletc.org for more information in the next few weeks if you want to know more about that. And that was the last slide I had there. Unless anyone has any other questions, I'll move us into old business. Do folks have any thoughts or comments or anything they want to share about how the DEIS 101 facilitated workshop went in April?
I thought you did really well. A nice job.
Agreed. You did a great job, Michael.
Thank you. Yes.
I think we need to have these things occur on wet, dark nights so that people want to attend them and not be outside in the sunshine.
I mean, one thing, this, as you all know, because I've mentioned it before in our board meetings, this is something that, myself and a couple of folks have wanted to do for years now. We had a few hiccups, including sending Tracy the incorrect link, which was probably not the best thing that we ever did. But the recording's not too bad. I'm excited that we really proved that it is possible both to do a hybrid meeting or event and do it really on a shoestring, no money budget. So that's kind of a cool thing. But the recording is there, and I think it's a pretty good recording and useful if folks want to, like EIS, we structured it as environmental impact statements are part of, any large project. So it's there, certainly for a little while now, for anybody who wants to see it and is facing other projects. And we've got, a presentation put together. And so I'm also hoping to, find some time here in the next month or two to maybe refine that presentation a little bit, maybe make it a little prettier design wise, and see if it's either something that we can share around with other community groups here in West Seattle now that we've got one put together, or even maybe just kind of host another one, kind of a little quiet Zoom meeting with a few people and maybe re-record it, or have it just cut down time wise again. So it's something that we can have to share it around. We've got the info, we don't need to make it up, and then folks can tuck it away for when the next large building or public institution or something is being built in a corner of West Seattle. And so kind of excited about that.
The High Bridge is rebuilt.
Yeah,
It'll be lovely.
Other thoughts from people?
Okay.
All right. Well, hearing none, I'm excited at the thought that we can end early, and it's not dark yet. So, folks could still kind of
I think it's raining.
slip out into their backyard. Is it actually raining? Rats.
Oh, Phil's got his hand up.
Yes.
Hi, yeah, I'm Phil Frick. I'm also on the board of the Admiral Neighborhood Association. And Deb came to me a while back and said, why don't you guys be our physical sponsor for the West Seattle Transportation Coalition? And I said, yeah, sounds good to me. So I presented it to the board last night. They're very interested in it. I think it could be absolutely possible. Deb's coming to one of our meetings next and kind of explain the pros and cons of it because she's involved obviously with Morgan. So it looks good to me, and we're looking forward to have Deb come and kind of give us the ins and outs of it.
And that's as a fiscal sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome to me. I mean, I trust you and Deb can handle that, but if you want to tag me in for any reason, feel free.
Sure, absolutely.
I was wondering about the wisdom of having, we don't have a treasurer, or is Larry our treasurer?
Larry's
Yeah.
technically our treasurer, but since we don't have a whole lot of money moving around,
Exactly, but I was thinking
he's not working too hard at it.
and maybe he'd be at the Admiral meeting anyway, if it's not sports season, so, or it's not school season.
The $25 per match hour that I spend on board meetings finally has a chance to go somewhere.
Yeah. Hey.
Okay, well, that's.
Hey, that could be $300 a year. I did the math right. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, and so Phil, just let me know that where that actually is and the date that you were talking about. Okay?
Yeah, it's going to be in June, and I'll contact everybody, and
That's great.
anybody that wants to come is happy to come to it.
Cool. Okay.
Awesome. All right. Is there any other new business that other folks would like to bring up?
Got
I'm
Phil.
good.
I'm not seeing anything. Marty?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Wow.
Thanks.
Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
Adjourn. Moved.
Second, third, quadruple.
All right. Well, we will see everybody again in May. As I said, we do have, at the moment, we have Mayor Bruce Harrell confirmed to
Yep.
be here. I believe we're still working to confirm. We're trying to have the citywide council members there as well. And I don't
Okay.
believe we have confirmations on them yet, but
don't.
the mayor should
Okay.
be with us. So let's
That's
look
so
forward to
great.
that.
That'll probably be a pretty busy meeting.
Yeah. So think about your questions and then get them in if you wanted them slid into the slide deck. And
Perfect.
I will see everybody soon.
Thank
Sounds
you,
good. All
Deb,
right,
for
have a
doing
nice
my
evening.
job
Later.
tonight.
Thank you, Michael.
Good night.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hey.